And it's about language and how we talk about immigrants. We are in Western Sydney. This is an incredibly beautiful place because of the amount of incredible people, strength and stories that come from the diversity of the communities that live here. And I think we need to understand that we can have this conversation around immigration without talking and demonising immigrants for just being and existing.
I'm an Anglican minister who's lived here in southwest Sydney for over 12 years now. It's just a wonderful melting pot of people from all over the world. Nevertheless, increased immigration has brought with it a range of issues, from greatly increased pressure on housing supply all the way through to some social tensions as deep, divisive conflicts wash onto our shores from overseas. Is there a limit to immigration for Australia? And if so, what is it and who's going to get to decide?
Andrew Bragg.
Well, firstly, in relation to the social cohesion issue, I think that Australia's greatest success has been the settlement of millions of people from all around the world since the Second World War. We are the most successful country on earth and the most diverse and cohesive, and that's to be celebrated because, generally speaking, people leave the conflicts from the old country at the door, and that is, long may that be the case. Secondly, on the housing and the migration issue, when we had Senate estimates recently, I asked the Treasury and Katie Gallagher, the Finance Minister, can you please talk me through the modelling you've done, which shows the impact of 1 million people coming into the country in the last 2 years and only building 160,000 houses a year? And they said, we haven't done that modelling. And I said, well, that's bad, Minister Gallagher, isn't it? And she said, no, it's not bad. So the fact that the government don't understand the nexus between people coming into the country and housing construction is one of the reasons we have a massive housing crisis in this country, because Australians are competing with people when they go to an auction against people who've been in the country for 5 minutes. And it is ridiculous. The Australian dream is dying because of Labor's mismanagement of migration and housing.
But that didn't just happen over the last 3 years.
That's just fundamentally not true. And it doesn't, the facts don't even lay that out.
Those are numbers.
Let Max speak.
With respect, we had an experiment on what happens in this country when we have zero migration, net zero migration. And it was during COVID. And house prices went up at the fastest rate we've seen in decades. There's a study that found that in between 2019 and 2023, the number of students coming to this country internationally decreased at the same time as rents went up 30%. You'll find both sides of politics in a race to the bottom on migration because they don't want to deal with the real structural issues in our housing crisis. And you talk about competition at auctions, it comes from property investors who have big tax handouts in their pocket in the form of negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount. Over the next 10 years, both sides of politics will give $176 billion, sometimes to property investors with 20 or 30 homes. Okay. And that means it's easier to buy their 21st than it is for someone to buy their first. And that's the kernel of injustice at the heart of our housing system.
You are the Minister for Cities, and our cities, particularly here in Western Sydney, are clearly really struggling. Jenny McAllister, how do you see how to resolve that and to that question, which was about immigration levels?
Well, I liked the way you posed the question, and in particular acknowledging the kind of vibrancy that actually comes from being part of a multicultural community. And it's incredibly important that we start with that every time, because there are plenty of bad actors that don't want to acknowledge that, and it's really important that those of us do, right?
Of course, sorry.
Jenny's talking. Jenny's talking.
It was the big sigh. I wasn't sure where that was going. But I think it is of course true that we need to have sustainable rates of migration. And we've said really clearly that in that very immediate spike after the COVID lockdowns and the closing of our borders, that those rates in that immediate post-COVID period were too high, and we wanted to see them come down, and we are seeing them come down now to more sustainable levels. But the housing issues are decades in the making, and what is required is a really serious investment in increasing supply. And we can't get around that. And that is not something that is going to happen quickly. We need to work at it in a really persistent way. There's no single solution, no single silver bullet. There's no tax reform or super solution that will solve all of the problems. What's needed is a big drive to more houses.
I can see you want to say something.
Yeah, I do. And it's about language and how we talk about immigrants. We are in Western Sydney. To the first part of your question, this is an incredibly beautiful place. It's a place where I've chosen to continue, and probably will, because I'm heavily biased, continue to put my feet here, build my family in this region, because of the amount of incredible people, strength, and stories that come from the diversity of the communities that live here. And I think we need to understand that we can have this conversation around immigration without talking and demonizing immigrants for just being and existing. And I'd like us to use more humanizing language in our conversation. I don't know if anyone else on this panel has taught in a university. I've taught, I've coordinated a subject, I've sat down and seen the tears in international students' eyes, or even just domestic students really, who just have a visible difference and talk about how they feel so othered by the language and the conversations that do happen around immigration. I think immigration, we underestimate how much it is a soft diplomacy skill. The amount of learning that happens in classrooms, in workplaces, on the street, just at a local community shop for food. And I think we need to appreciate and again watch our language, because the way we talk about immigrants as if it's an outbreak and that they're poisonous is something that actually is deeply painful.
Certainly, post-colonial Australia is built on the back of migration, and this entire room...
Everyone in this room.
Absolutely demonstrates that. I want to go back to you, David. I'm interested.
Yep.
What concerns you? What have you noticed?
Look, well, I mean, there are just the systemic, the structural infrastructure questions of housing and support of that, which we can't escape from, and you notice that are here. I think I'm actually more concerned about the social issues that are underlying what's going on. And Australia, look, we've got Assyrian neighbours. We love them. They're great. They fled from northern Iraq from ISIS. They fled the bullets and they fled that ideology. And they're grappling to understand why they're hearing that more and more around them. And why those sorts of things are happening. The language is happening here. We've got lessons from the UK and Central Europe, which is my own ethnic heritage. I'm an immigrant too, of grappling with this difficult question of social cohesion. How do we maintain this vibrant nation that we are? It's brilliant here in Australia, but also set a limit on socially what is happening in Australia. And we need to have a mature conversation about it, I'm thinking, rather than, as you've said, letting the bad agents just be agitated and unhelpful about it.
Mark, have you observed? Yeah, absolutely.
What I was trying to say, and sir, you may have misunderstood me, was that I think that migration is an incredibly positive part of our story, and there are occasionally people who wish to say otherwise. We shouldn't have any truck with that. We need to affirm and support and endorse the role that migrant communities have played and are playing in our communities. And it's really important as leaders and as political leaders that we do that.
But the damage that's done when politicians on both sides, and unfortunately, Jenny, it is both Labor and the Liberals, I've watched it happen in Parliament, try to link migration to the housing and cost of living crisis when there is no evidence to suggest that that has what's caused increasing house prices and rents. That is what causes damage. And what happens is it divides our communities up. And the only people that benefits are the billionaires and big corporations who are the real culprits for our housing and cost of living crisis. The question you have to ask yourself is who wins when we're blaming each other for a crisis caused by billionaires and big corporations?
Jenny, quick response from you.
Well, Well, that is a fact, by the way. Immigrants spend more than they cost. So that immigrants, to use the term, and I know it's loaded, but like immigrants fundamentally add more money to the economy than they take out. So that is a fact. Also, international students only make up about 6% of the rental market. So the whole argument that somehow international students are a problem confuses me no end. And yes, the thing that happened during the pandemic, again, it's well documented. Just to come back to the core of what you were saying, everyone in this room, everyone watching can trace their lineage back to migration in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, unless they are Indigenous, right?
Yes. But what you're talking about is what we do with people when they arrive. And I think that is something that Australia has occasionally done very well and occasionally done very badly. We're talking about housing earlier. Where are people moving to? Is there support structures? Is there cultural organisations and communities built around that? Is there transport? These are the things that... Is there education around? Is there parkland around? These are the things that dictate whether people... Again, integration is another word that is really loaded, and I'm only using it for lack of another one. These are the things that dictate whether we become cohesive as a society, whether we cross-pollinate and share and become a better society. Those are the things that shape that. And it is fair to say that there have been times in Australia's history where we've done that really badly. But... You know, PK, me, we're all part of, you know, my mum came to Australia, and, you know, like, we're all part of this kind of larger tapestry of Australia, and at different points it's worked well, and at different points it's needed work, and I think it's okay to ask the question, how are we doing that?
Yeah.
But can we do it in a way, to your point, that doesn't demonise, that acknowledges what's good about Australia, what we can build on to become better, in a way that we are welcoming as a nation?